All right, old school NBA fans, self-researched NBA facts. Got another video for you. As always, thanks to anybody who watches my videos, subscribes to my channel. I really appreciate it. Want to send a special thanks to my man, G the Great. Sent me a super thanks. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for your generosity. In this video here, I'm going to talk about something real simple that just doesn't get emphasized enough. And I think it gets normalized, I guess, because of the way it's presented on big media by the people like the Stephen A. Smiths, Chris Broussard, Skip Baylesses, the alleged Michael Jordan pundits. They're terrible at it because they keep talking about, 6-0 in the final, 6-0 in the final, just making it seem like it's no big deal. The exact same thing has happened to Bill Russell. Everybody thinks that, Bill Russell had all the best players. There was only 8 teams. Yeah, you got it. You figured it out in a nutshell. Never mind how many times Bill Russell won close games in games 6 and 7. A lot of them. You should really go back and research this stuff. This was no cakewalk by any means. But the mental fortitude to win 8 in a row like that is just unparalleled. The fact is that in the history of the NBA, which is coming up on 80 years, there have been 5 times where a team had a championship winning streak of 3 or more. And there really has only been the Lakers, Minneapolis Lakers, in the early 50s, they did a three-peat. They lost. They won 2 more. And then they were going for a three-peat, and they got beat. And then you had Boston's 8-year run, and then they lost in 67 to an historically great team. But to win 8 in a row is insane. I understand that people think that, you got the best team, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, in some of those championships, they didn't. Most of the ones, in the late 50s, early 60s, they absolutely did have the best team, the deepest team. But they had the best player. And that's all there is really to say about it. But when it comes to winning 3 championships in a row, since 1970, that's the last 55 seasons, it's been attempted 10 times, but only 3 made it happen. So I would think that those 3 that made it happen, that would be something special. But like I said, because of the way the press is, they're so anti-Michael Jordan now, and the guys who are for Jordan are just not presenting this correctly. Yes, that is definitely a very strong point to throw out there, that in the last 55 years, only 3 teams won 3 in a row, and Michael Jordan was the best player on 2 of them. I mean, that's very powerful. But there's so much more to Michael Jordan's career, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. This is specifically talking about the three-peats and what it took to win them, and how hard it was, and how rare it was, and why it's become normalized, and I don't know why. But anyway, like I said, there were 10 attempts at doing this since 1955. The first one was the Boston Celtics, believe it or not. They won 8 in a row from 1959. They won 1 in 57. They lost in 58. Then from 1959 through 1966, they won 8 straight championships. They lost in 67. Philadelphia 76ers won it. And then in 68, 69, Boston won it. And they were not the best team. So that's what just always kills me. They were not the best team. They didn't have the best record. There was 2 or 3 teams that were as good, and a couple, the Lakers and the 76ers, were better than Boston was. But Boston won. They had that guy, and they had the mental fortitude. But anyway, so in 1970, Boston, going for the three-peat, they missed the playoffs. They won 14 less games than the year before. I talked about this in yesterday's video about how they lost Sam Jones and they replaced him with JoJo White, another Hall of Fame shooting guard who is really good, basically just as good as Sam Jones. He just didn't win as much. And then the other replacement was Bill Russell retired also, and they replaced him with a guy named Hank Finkel. That's only 0.2 of a point, 2/10 of a point less than what Russell was giving you. So since everybody hinges everything on scoring, what happened? Why would they fall apart that bad? Well, here's an example of why Russell. I'm not going to get into it too much, but why the impact of Bill Russell. So Bailey Howell was on Boston from 1967 to 1969 at age 30 to 32. Well, the year before, when he in 1966, he averaged 17.5 points a game. He comes to Boston, and in those 3 years, 67, 68, and 69, he averaged 19.8 points per game. And he's at age 30 to 32 here, and he's only 29 the year before he played for Boston. So how could a guy give you 2.3 points a game average over the 3 seasons, who's obviously a little bit older, if there isn't some sort of an impact going on here? Now let's keep in mind, you got John Havlicek and you got Sam Jones. You have scorers on your team. Those are your leading scorers. So Bailey Howell comes in and does better than he did the year before. Okay, now here's the point. But after Bill Russell left, Bailey Howell is still on the Celtics. Havlicek's the leader now. His numbers went up a little bit, but all the players like Larry Siegfried, Tom Sanders, Don Nelson, M. Bryant, they're still on the team. That's it. Literally, there was 2 players that retired, replaced with 2 others. Bailey Howell in 1970 went from averaging, 19.9 points a game down to 12.6. So, and that's losing Sam Jones, your number 2 scorer. What happened? Bill Russell happened because he wasn't there. So, anyway, Boston had their shot in 1970. Havlicek, be the man, run the show and all that. And they didn't win it. That three-peat attempt was gone. And it took years later for Boston to, get back to the playoffs and start winning championships, when they had Dave Cowens and Charlie Scott and JoJo White and all that business. But anyway, okay. There was not another repeat winner from 1969 till 1988. That was a long stretch in the 70s and in the 80s. The 70s, it was parity the other way. It was parity of a bunch of mediocre teams. There's some good teams. The early 70s had great teams, no doubt. But the mid to late 70s, it was just a bunch of good or very good teams. There were not really any great teams in the late 70s. None that I've seen. But in the 80s, obviously, there was 3 great teams. And then later, Detroit later on. But anyway, so the Lakers finally do the back-to-back. Somebody in the 80s wins 2 in a row. The Lakers do it in 87 and 88. In 1989, the Lakers swept the Western playoffs. They won all 3 series, 11-0. Looked like they were going to, do damage. But they didn't. They got swept in the finals by Detroit. Now, I understand Byron Scott was out and Magic got injured. I think it was in Game 2. He tried to give it a go in Game 3 and couldn't. But the fact remains, the Lakers got swept, period. The year before, in 88, Detroit had an injury. Isaiah Thomas in Game 6. In Game 7, he was extremely, obviously hobbled. Did anybody have any sympathy for Detroit? I didn't think so. No, of course not. So these things happen. Injuries happen. The Lakers were not going to beat the Pistons with a healthy Magic and Byron Scott. Their time was coming to an end. That's just how these things work. It's extremely hard to maintain an entire team to be focused that long on winning, keeping the team intact through free agency, avoiding major injuries. All these things play into it. It's very, very hard to do. But the Lakers got swept by Detroit, and that was that. Detroit picks up the ball and runs with it. In 89 and 90, they're looking unstoppable. Any team not named the Bulls in those 2 years in the playoffs, 22-2, just demolishing anybody in their path. But the Bulls at least gave them a fight. They were 8-5 in the 2 series against the Bulls. But the Pistons, they won both years. And then in 91, they're vying for a three-peat. And people can talk about the Pistons were old, whatever. Okay, the fact is, the Pistons just won 2 championships in a row. They still have Dennis Rodman, who is smack dab in the middle heart of his prime, winning Defensive Player of the Year. Joe Dumars is first team all defense in the middle of his prime. I think he's like 28 years old. Isaiah Thomas is 30, who he did have injuries problems that year, absolutely. But the next couple years, he was still making all-stars and averaging more points per game and assists per game in 92 and 93 than he did in 91. So the other players, John Sally, he was young, definitely in his prime. Players like Vinnie Johnson, James Edwards, Bill Laimbeer, they were definitely getting older, no doubt about it. Mark Aguirre was like 32 or something like that. But if we're saying 32 to 35 years old is old, okay, let's just kind of put a pin in that one, and we'll get back to it. If 32 to 35 is old, or even 30 in Isaiah's case, or 31 in Magic's case in 91, I've been told he was old too. Let's just go ahead and put a pin in that one real quick. Okay, so obviously Detroit tried in the Eastern Conference Finals in 91. They got swept by the Bulls. And now the Bulls are the team that's going to run with it. And they win the championship in 91, 92, and 93 was a real struggle. There was even struggles in 92. I know people think that they just cakewalk through that. 91, they did until the finals. The finals was no cakewalk. Even though they won in 5, there was 3 games that could have went either way. The Lakers got one of them. The Bulls got the other 2. If the Lakers get both those games, they're up 3-2. So it really wasn't a cakewalk. That game was in overtime, game 3 also. Last second shot by Jordan and all that. Anyway, so 93, and then also in 92, the Bulls got pushed to 7 in the semifinals, pushed to 6 in the conference finals, and then 6 in the finals. No cakewalks. This wasn't the Lakers in 2002 against the Nets. Okay, the Bulls had stiff competition, whether people want to admit it or not. Okay, anyway, 93, the Bulls in the first 2 rounds, yeah, they played great. They did. The conference finals, however, in 93, Bulls were down 0-2, and it came down to one play. I always say this. That series came down to a single play. Charles Smith with the ball under the basket. If he makes that shot, the Bulls lose, period. They're down 3-2. I think the Bulls probably win game 6. Game 7 in New York, the Knicks would have won that game. I guarantee it. I know it. I thought the Knicks, I wouldn't say they were the better team. I thought that they was really, really close. Basically, they were even. But the Knicks having home court advantage is why I think the Knicks would have won that in game 7. I just do. I think it would have been their time. And that's how it works. These teams go for a three-peat, and the new up-and-coming team is ready to dethrone you. They're hungry. You know what I mean? They're going after you. And it's hard for the team that's winning to maintain that focus, not only to get all your team on the same page and focused on winning, but also avoiding this team from knocking you off. And the Knicks almost did it. And then the Suns, same thing in the finals. I mean, if John Paxson misses that shot, it's game 7 in Phoenix. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know about that one. Who knows? Maybe the Bulls would have won, but maybe they wouldn't have. They were not clearly the better team. They weren't. Those 2 teams were even. The difference was Michael Jordan, period. Okay, so anyway, the Bulls complete the three-peat, the first team to win 3 in a row in 25 years. Since the I guess it would have been whatever it was when the Boston won 3 in a row, but they won 8 in a row, so would have been since 1966 at least. That's 27 years the Bulls pulled that off. Okay, Michael Jordan retires, and I did a video about that yesterday, about he had to retire to let other people win. So Houston took advantage of that opportunity, and they won it. In 94, 95, that great historic run they had, acquiring Clyde Drexler, all that came with that. In 96, though, they did have Drexler had some injury issues and yada, yada. But you got a new hungry team, the Seattle Supersonics, and they were very hungry. And so was Utah Jazz. They were hungry. I think Orlando just wasn't really the same when it came to playing against a really good team. When they got beat 95 by Houston, I think when Nick Anderson missed those free throws, it basically killed the franchise, which is just crazy to think that, but that's what happened. So anyway, 96, Houston gets swept by Seattle in the conference semifinals. Seattle was very hungry, very good team. They did not back down from anybody. Gave the Bulls, even though the Bulls had the series wrapped up when it was 3-0, they gave them something to think about. There's no doubt about it in those last couple games. So now that Houston gets swept by Seattle, Seattle beats another hungry team, Utah, in 7 in the conference finals. A tough series. And my man Jeff Hornacek had a very good series, but they just came up short. Seattle had home court advantage. Anyway, on to the finals for them. So now the Bulls, that are they're two almost 3 years removed from their last championship, and the Bulls had no problem for the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and in the first three games of the finals. I mean, they won. Every game they had one loss. I think they were 14-1. I mean, it was over. They just destroyed everybody that season. A great historic season. Seattle did play with a lot of heart and pride, and won in games 5 and 6, or 4 and 5 rather. But then game 6, even though Michael Jordan didn't shoot well from the field, he shot very well from the line, and he kept Hersey Hawkins from doing anything. And, the Bulls just kind of held on and won. But anyway, that started their three-peat. 96, 97, and then, of course, in 98 against very hungry Indiana team and a starving Utah team that felt like they maybe should have beat them in 97. In 98, even closer, but ultimately the Bulls do hold them off. But what's funny is the Bulls had Scottie Pippen at 32 years old. They had Ron Harper, I believe, was 34 years old. Michael Jordan, 35 years old. And Dennis Rodman was 37 years old. The oldest team to ever win a championship. But they're not old. But the Pistons in 91, who actually were younger by starters, by your top 7 players, they were younger than the Bulls were. And you could say whatever you want about, all the tread on their tires. The Bulls just won 2 championships in a row, going for a third. You don't think that took a lot of energy and focus and all that? Of course it did. So the Bulls win their three-peat right here in 98. And the next team with the shot at it was the Lakers. In 2000, 2001, and then 2002, the Lakers completed the three-peat. And they did have tough series in there. Some people say in 2002, Sacramento should have won. It was some bogus calls. I agree. But it took 2 top 10 all-time players in their primes to pull this off. That's what it took. That's how hard it is to win 3 in a row. Period. Okay. Then there was a little bit of a gap. Nobody had a shot. Nobody repeated until the Lakers in 2009 and 2010. And the Lakers won the first two in that, and they're going for the three-peat in 2011. They played Dallas, and I've heard people say, Kobe was hurt, the supporting cast wasn't that great, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was watching some of that series, and Kobe looked pretty damn athletic to me. In game 1, he shoots the go-ahead three-pointer at the buzzer, and he missed it. But I'm just saying, he elevated way above Jason Kidd, who was trying to stop him. And then even in game 3, I mean, he was making all kinds of pull-up jumpers and looked pretty good for a guy who's, really severely hobbled. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't noticeable. It wasn't like Isaiah Thomas in the 88 finals. It wasn't like that. And, I'm sure he was hobbled to a certain degree. But it's hard to have a team maintain that kind of focus, that kind of dedication, and hold off all these hungry teams that are just coming at you. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to stand for you winning again. You get the best shot from the other team. And to withstand it like that, it's difficult. And the Lakers did not win. They got swept. So you see a theme here. Lakers got swept in 11. Houston got swept in 96. Detroit got swept in 91. The Lakers got swept in 89. Boston missed the playoffs entirely, so they didn't even get a chance to get swept. So then the next opportunity was Miami, who won it in. Their super team won it in 2012 and 2013. 13 with the super duper team. Now you even added Ray Allen. The team was ridiculous. 2014, now the LeBron people will tell you, oh, Dwayne Wade's knee was not that great, yada, yada. And that may be true. But that guy's bad knee, Michael Jordan was winning against Utah with Pippen having a bad back. Way worse than what Wade was doing. And don't tell me, because I will not listen to it, that the 2014 Spurs were definitively better than the 98 Jazz. I won't hear of it. No, I just won't hear of it. I would say those teams were very close. Hard to say for sure who is the actual better team. But it's not definitive in the Spurs' favor. I'm not buying that at all. But anyway, so the Miami gets gentlemen swept and has either, I think that's the worst or the second worst defeat in a point per game margin of victory over the series in NBA history, in finals history. So anyway, they didn't make it either. Again, it's very hard. And of course, LeBron James goes on to form the next super team. So the last team that's had a chance to do this, the only team in the last decade, was Golden State. Golden State, obviously, they won in 15, lost in 16. Then they got Kevin Durant, won it in 17 and 18. So now you got two top 20 all-time players in their primes making this happen with a couple other guys that are probably going to be in the Hall of Fame too. A loaded squad, a ridiculously loaded squad. Well, Kevin Durant got hurt in 2019. And, people will say, well, if Durant was there, they would have won. Maybe. Maybe they would have. Probably they would have. But the fact is, it's hard to maintain over 3 years in a row, to maintain that focus, that dedication, to hold off all the hungry teams that are giving you their best shot and stay healthy. It's hard to do. The Bulls barely did it in 98. Like I said, Pippen was pretty much finished at the end there. They just had enough to get over the top, barely. But Golden State, even with the Durant injury, they go back to the team they were in 2016, and they won 73 games. But Toronto was red hot. Kawhi Leonard was leading this team. They had beaten some pretty good teams in the East playoffs, especially Milwaukee in the East Finals in 6. They were a 60-win team. Toronto beat them, and Toronto beat Golden State in 6 games. What can you say? That's what happened. It's hard to do. So, anyway, that's the point of this video. There have been 10 teams that have tried to do it since 1970. That's 55 years. 10 tries, but only 3 made it. And 2 were the Bulls in the 90s. Period. End of story. You say whatever you want about teammates, super team, competition, but at the end of it, the Bulls have two of the three-peats since 1970. And actually, I think since 1970, they also have 4 of the last 12 repeats as well. All these teams that were going for a three-peat. And then, of course, the Bulls winning a three-peat is actually 2 repeats, and the same with the Lakers. So I guess it would be 13. They got 4 of the last 13 repeats as well. But 2 of the 3 three-peats in the last 55 years. That is just such a humongous task to have a team do. And it was only outdid by Russell's Celtics. So anyway, that's all I got for this video. Hopefully people will, come to terms with what Michael Jordan and the Bulls did was historic. What they did is not something that was done, before or after, period. Now, you can say that the Bulls didn't have a team like the Celtics in the 80s or the Lakers in the 80s to compete with. And I would probably agree with that. But they also did not have that kind of firepower on their team. So if you put, if you were to take the 86 Celtics and you take Larry Bird off of it and you just give that whole roster to Michael Jordan, prime, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson, trust me, the Bulls are winning without any problems. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. Same with the Lakers. You know what I'm saying? Like you take, you put, instead of Magic Johnson, you have Byron Scott run the point. And Michael Jordan has, Byron Scott, James Worthy, Kareem, Jamal Wilkes, Bob McAdoo. Yeah, you give him all that and tell me he ain't going to win just the same. So I just think it's dumb, or the 76ers. Take Dr. J off and give Jordan Maurice Cheeks, Andrew Toney, Bobby Jones, and Moses Malone and tell me he's not winning championships. Of course he's winning championships. He didn't have a super insanely stacked roster. He had a really good, vital to their success, number 2. And then he had role players fill the rest of the roster. They did not have anybody that was making, all NBAs and all stars and all that. They just didn't have those kind of players. So anyway, that's all I got for this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please hit the like button. And till next time.